Welcome back to NewsWire here on SportsGrid. Always great to catch up with Tom Vecchio. And with Tom, it's our first baseball conversation of the upcoming 2026 season. So great to have Tom back here on the show. And we'll talk about some of the teams that he's at least in on in the early part of spring training. Naturally, as we get closer to the season, a lot more opinions, easier to formalize. Pitchers and catchers reported they're back on the field. Full squads all reporting early next week. Spring training games next weekend. Wow.
Mm.
Hey, Tom, great to catch up with you here on the show. And let's kind of get into it. Some of the news on players has been stolen a little bit by the news that came out in the last 48 hours, which is sort of going through some of the new rules in Major League Baseball, which always catch everybody and everyone starts getting angry and yelling and screaming. But meanwhile, all these new rules have really worked out the last couple of years too. But the ABS system is in play, tapping on the head this year to sort of challenge these calls. And, I wonder if it affects your thinking at all in dynamics of betting or anything else.
It does, and immediately my mind goes to probably the opposite ends of the spectrum, where one would be in one scenario, pitchers are getting out of innings quicker because we're actually seeing pitches that actually should be strikes, and those are going to be called strikes and strikeouts. Therefore, pitchers are getting out of innings earlier, and they're saving pitches. Therefore, they can go deeper into games. And on the other side, it would be, hang on, that pitcher actually, that's a ball, and that pitcher has to stay in. Therefore, the next guy comes up, he fouls off some more, another walk or a single here or there, and therefore he's being pulled early, especially early in the season, where we know that pitchers are not fully stretched out and they don't want them to go super deep. So they're going to be super, conservative with things where they actually want to pull them after 60, 70 some odd pitches, and they're only getting to the fourth inning. So it's way too early to tell where things would go. Frankly, I'm going to say to be very cautious with betting overs on pitcher strikeouts or innings. And I'm going to be siding with a lot of unders until we get a decent sample size.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. And, naturally, spring training, we'll see some of this in action like we did last year, and then we'll know more during the regular season. One of the teams that Tom wanted to bring to the table today and kind of go through some of the thinking on maybe some futures opportunities, Tom, is the Detroit Tigers. So
Mm.
I guess it's a two-part question. Number one, why do you like the Tigers this season? And number two, is it simply because of the moves that they made in the past week, or was it something that you liked prior to these moves to add the couple of pitches that they did, one future Hall of Famer and another starting pitcher that slides into the two spot in their rotation?
Right. I would say it's a bit of everything. It's not just one thing. First off, Skubal deserves that money that he got. Getting Valdez is great. Bringing back Verlander is great. To me, I think that the Tigers need to have a little bit of urgency when it comes into the season and really approaching the deadline, because there have been some quotes and things that Skubal has referred to dating back to last season, that he wants to be somewhere where the team wants to win as much as he does. And we know how the team ended last season, which was absolutely terrible. The collapse in September, the Guardians come storming back, they win the division. But if Skubal is going to remain with the Tigers long term as he approaches free agency, he needs to believe that the Tigers are willing to take the steps and go all chips to the middle to prove to him, essentially, like, I don't want to say they need to bend the knee to him and say, if you want to stay, we'll do whatever you want. But they need to make moves. Last trade deadline, acquiring Chris Paddock, no offense to him, but like, he's not a needle mover. They need to make moves to show that we are willing to make the moves to retain the two-time reigning Cy Young, arguably the best pitcher in all of baseball. So what they did last year, ending right at 85 wins, I'm going to say they could have been vastly over this number, Craig, going to 80, 88, 90 wins, whatever it might have been, if they just didn't collapse in September. So the urgency and the kind of randomness that we saw last year, those things will combine with the offseason moves and a great hitting lineup to push them to closer to 90 wins this year.
Yeah, definitely. So 59 wins and had a big lead, and then all of a sudden things sort of fell apart. But with this rotation now of Skubal, who is back, Valdez, who's been added, Verlander, who's been added to the rotation, would slot into the four spot. Looks great on paper. We know paper doesn't win anything these days, especially with starting pitching, but they certainly look a lot better, you would say, at the start of spring training as well. All right, their season win total, by the way, 85.5 to win the Central, plus 115 to win the American League. Detroit is at 9-1, and the World Series odds are 12-1. So, before we pivot over and do the Texas Rangers here for a minute, Tom, another team that you like, which of those four are the ones that you've played or are considering playing?
It would be the win total over 85.5. Again, I think this is the spot where they could go over this and, not win the AL Central if the Guardians have another strong year. If the Royals have a little bit more consistency, they can go over 85.5 and still not win the American League. But again, I think the urgency from the Tigers needs to be paramount to push them over this and acquire more pieces at the deadline to really show that they're serious and Skubal wants to stay there.
Let's get to the Texas Rangers here. The Rangers definitely going through some changes, Tom, in the offseason,
Yes.
making some big trades and getting a new manager. Skip Schumaker is the new skipper there, took a year off and is back after a nice little run with Miami making the postseason. Marcus Semien is out. Brandon Nimmo is in. They also added MacKenzie Gore to the top of their lineup. And so
Mhm.
their rotation, 1 through 3, veteran and solid. Grom,
Yeah.
Eovaldi, Gore, and then who knows if they get anything from Leiter and Rocker at the back end of the rotation. I think they just signed Jordan Montgomery, right? Didn't they just sign
Yes.
him? I think, if I'm not mistaken, too. All right, so they got 6 or 7 starters. They're going to need a lot more, but the Rangers definitely, Tom. The big news for them this week was losing their top prospect, Sebastian Walcott. They're going to have to replace him. Do you like this team enough to go over on this number as well, 83.5?
I do, and I think the lineup is good. It's not great. I think most people would agree with that. We know how good the Mariners are in that division. The Astros, I'm not super sold on them this year, but it really comes down to the pitching for me. And deGrom's not the number one pitcher that he once was. I'm very high on MacKenzie Gore as I have been for years since he was traded from the Padres to the Nationals in the Soto deal. But to me, it comes to stability. If you can get deGrom and Nathan Eovaldi to bring you a solid kind of 1-2 combo, Gore takes a step forward because he was fantastic in the first half of the season last year. And then if we see a small step forward for both Leiter and Kumar Rocker, now we're dealing with a rotation there's no pure number one. There's no guy that's a number 5, but they're all like a 2, 3, 4. And as long as we have stability, that will push them over. That will bring us where you don't need to push the ground. You actually ease off him because the other guys have taken that step forward. And that just brings a sense of confidence and trust for the entire team. And that was what will help push them over the 83.5.
What is Pro Baseball Today getting fired up here on SportsGrid?
We start this Sunday, 10 to 12, every Sunday from now until the end of August. We're doing previews. We'll touch on the World Baseball Classic as we lead into that over the next month, and then talking everything, awards, team win totals, you name it.
Can't wait to catch it, Tom Vecchio. Thanks again. Have a good weekend.
Same to you.